Hello everybody! In this video I'm going to work on an activity that relates to the iteration revisited reading. So to get there I can just go to the course schedule and click on that reading assignment, and then I can scroll down to the optional activities section and we're going to work on activity 1. So here we're going to write a Python program that generates a random number. Then we're going to repeatedly ask the user to guess the number, and then print a message once they get it. So to start working on this, I'm going to open up IDLE, and I'm going to make a new file where I can write my program. I'll just get myself a little set up here. Alright, so I'm just going to start off by writing myself a main function where I'm going to execute the program. And I'm going to make sure to call that, because if I don't call my main function, then nothing will happen because I won't actually run what's inside the function body. And then I'm going to write myself some comments just to see the tasks that I need to complete inside this main. So first I'm going to need to generate a random number between 1 and 10. Then I'm going to repeatedly ask the user to guess the number, and then when they get it, print message. So these are the things that I need to do, and the best thing for me to do is to actually tackle these one at a time. So get a program that just does one of these things, make sure that it runs, and then move on to another task. And so the first one I'm going to do is actually the last one, to print the message, because in the description of the activity I actually have a message that I can just copy and paste right in there. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it in. Print, and then I'm going to print that, and I'm going to save. So yeah, I'm going to save it. Okay. Guessing game, let's call it. And we'll save it in the CSCI folder. Alright, save that. So you might be thinking to yourself, hey, you're supposed to print how many guesses it took. It's not going to be 6 every time, right? And you're right. In the end, I'm going to want this to print the number of guesses that the user actually took. But as I'm building up my program, it's okay if I'm kind of doing something wrong on my way to the right answer, because I want to develop my solution little bit by little bit, and sometimes the little bit that I develop is actually, you might think of it as a wrong program, but it's just a step that I need to take to get to the right answer in the most efficient way. Because if I just put everything in there and try to run it, I'm going to have a bunch of bugs. They're going to be hard to track down. So I'm just going to start with this very simplest thing I can do, and I'm going to run this program, and hopefully it works. Great. So we have our program running, just printing one message. And if you're watching this video and you haven't done this activity yourself yet, then I would suggest pausing it and working on the next 2 parts by yourself. If you get stuck, you can always come back to the video. So if you've already done the activity, on we go. So we need to work on these other tasks. So maybe let's do this random number first. So if you remember, we've seen a way to generate random numbers before. In lab 1, we generated random numbers between 0 and 1 for the red, green, and blue values for our pencil. So we know that there's this random module out there, but we want a number between 1 and 10. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look up the documentation for the random module on the old Google. So let's go ahead and look up random module Python. And we can see that the first result here is the documentation for the random module. Let's go take a look at it. So you can always look up modules, or even just built-in Python, you can look up the documentation. And that can be really useful. So we see a description of the random module, and then we get into a list of all the functions. So I happen to know that the one that we want is randint, right? We want a random integer. So I'm just going to Command F and search for it. This is a good way to find stuff. If I didn't know exactly the name, I might search for something like integer, because I know that I'm looking for integer, and I can see that I would actually get there on the 4th integer result. So searching in this page is always a good option. Alright, so looks like random.randint will give us a random integer between A and B. So that sounds like exactly what we want. So let's use that. So random.randint, and we've even got the documentation here provided for us. So we want a number between 1 and 10, so we just paste that right in. And we have to remember to import the random module. Otherwise, Python won't know where to find this function. So I'm going to save this and run it. And we can maybe assume that our program's working, or we can actually just, we're going to need to save this as our number, So let's say the variable number will be assigned to whatever random number is generated here. And then we're going to say print the number is number. And this way we can see that we're actually generating a random number. Let's go ahead and run that. I need that comma outside of the string. Okay, so it looks like we got a number between 1 and 10, so that's a good sign. One thing I just want to point out is how Python sometimes almost feels like natural language, right? So in natural language, we said generate a random number between 1 and 10, and we just got to say randint 1 and 10. I just think that's a really nice thing about Python. All right, so we got our random number, and it looks like it's working. So let's move on to this task here. Repeatedly ask the user to guess the number. And so we don't know how many times we're going to have to ask, but we know that we're going to have to do something over and over again. And so what do we think we're going to need to use here? A while loop, right? So let's say while. Let's actually write the pseudocode for this while loop. So while, let's say number is not equal to guess, right? Actually, I'm going to say while guess is not equal to number. Not that it really matters, but it just feels better to me. So as long as our guess is not equal to our number, we're going to need to ask the user for a new guess. Great. So that's our sort of pseudocode for what we need to do here. So let's just see if we can write that in Python. So while guess not equal to a number, and I'm actually going to say guess equals get guess. So I'm going to write a function here to get the guess from the user, just because I can, and it just feels more readable to me. So that means I'm going to need to define this function, get guess. What's it going to do? It's going to ask the user, please guess a number. And we're going to want to save the result of that to guess, right? Some variable guess is going to get assigned to whatever happens here. And we also remember that input returns us a string, right? So even though they're going to guess a number, like say they type 6, input's going to give us back the string 6. Use input to get guess from user. So if they typed 6, we would get the string 6. So we're going to need to change it to an integer. So let's go ahead and cast this to an int using the int function that we know. And then what are we going to need to do with this guess variable? We need to return it, right? Because we want to assign whatever this function does to this variable guess. All right, and that seems like it's going to work, huh? So let's just go ahead and run this, and we'll see what happens. All right, we got an error. That's great, because that means we get to look at the error message and try to figure out what's going wrong. So these error messages, if we trace down to our actually we can trace through these error messages, right? So in line 25, we get an error. So what's line 25? Oh, we have no. That's such a bummer we don't have line numbers. But I'm just going to guess. I'm going to guess that line 25 is this main call, right? And we can see that. And it says, okay, I got an error when I called main. And then the next line of this error message is saying, okay, where exactly inside main did I get an error? And it got it on line 19. Again, we don't have line numbers, which is annoying. But we can see what line is it that we're getting an error on. We're getting it on while guess is not equal to number. And then on the next line of this error message, we actually see what's the error. It's called an unbound local error, and it says local variable guess referenced before assignment. And so it's saying this guess variable isn't bound to any data. And so it can't execute this statement. And so what do we need to do? We need to just initialize our guess to something so that the first time we go through this while loop, guess has a value. So let's just assign guess to some number that couldn't possibly be the random number. So I'm just going to assign it to 0 because my number is always going to be between 1 and 10. So now I'm going to run this, and it appears to be working. So let's get this to where y'all can see it better. So we need to guess a number. Maybe we guess 4. All right, so we knew it was 3 because we printed it out. But it looks like our guessing is working. When we guessed the wrong number, we guessed 4, it ran the while loop again, and when we guessed the right number, we got 3. Or excuse me, we finished the while loop. So what is left? Well, we need to edit our error message here, right? Because right now we're saying 6 guesses, but that only took us 2 guesses. So how can we do that? Well, I would say, so we need to be able to keep track of how many times we run this while loop, right? So we're going to need a variable that we can just increment every time we run the while loop. Let's just go ahead and call this count. And at first there's 0 guesses. And every time we run the while loop, we need to increment count, right? So we need to set it to whatever it was before plus 1. So let's run this. And now, oh, I just realized while I am counting, I didn't change that message, right? So it still says 6 instead of count, but we'll just test our program out. Okay, so I said I need to change this 6, right? And what do I need to change it to? I need to change it to the actual count that we build up as we are running our program. So now I should print congratulations, that took whatever count is guesses. So let's see if that works. Alright, let's just pretend we don't know the number, put in some different numbers here, and that looks like it got the right count. So I would say that we have successfully finished this activity. And so the big takeaways here are to use a while loop when you don't know how many times you're going to need to run something. And just in general, this idea of incremental development and identifying what you're going to need to do in your program and just tackling those things one by one and not worrying if you have a wrong program in the middle. You don't have to jump straight to a perfect program. You just need to make small steps that get you closer, even if it feels like maybe they're taking you in the wrong direction at some point. That is okay.